All right, I'm hitting the button. I guess I'm live some places, getting some alerts. Live on Instagram. Hello, everyone. So, Rilus Dana here today with another live stream. Today, we're talking about guns. Have a special guest, have attorney Jim Alder here from Salt Lake City, Utah. He's an expert on gun trusts. So, let's bring him in. Hello, Jim. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Doing great. How are you?
Good, good. So we met. I guess it's been a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and I was looking for help with an issue in Utah. Actually, looking for a trustee or looking for help with the special needs trust is when I met you, and you were very helpful on that. So thanks again. I appreciate it. We're able to help answer that question for the client. But today we're focusing on guns. So I guess first, want you to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and where you practice.
Well, yeah, Jim Alder again. My law firm is Alder Law Group, and we're located in the Sugar House area of Salt Lake City. Also work out of my home in Bountiful, which is just north of Salt Lake. So in that general area, and I focus on estate planning in general. Trust planning. I do a lot of Medicaid asset protection trusts, special needs planning, and such. A lot of guardianship, conservatorship work. But one of the specialties that I've developed is gun trusts, planning for NFA weapons, and that started, probably 15 years ago. That people started calling me and asking me, "Do you do gun trusts?" And initially, I'd never heard of it, before, and had to look into it. But I had an opportunity to sit down with a guy that developed a system of gun trusts, and went and did a 3-day boot camp with him to learn all about it back then, and have been doing them ever since, and probably do more of that work than anybody in the state of Utah at this point.
Yeah. So gun trust. So let's give a little background. So Arizona, I tell people it's the Wild West, right? As far as like regular guns, they're just personal property here. But or unless the gun trust is for something that requires a license, is how I understand it. For a suppressor, I'm
Well,
not a gun guy. I just know you don't say silencer. I get more cred, right? When you say suppressor, and the people
yeah,
think I know what I'm talking about more.
it's not technically a license. When you to acquire those more restricted weapons, the silencer suppressors, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, machine guns. Those are the items regulated. Most of the items regulated under the National Firearms Act. You have to apply to the ATF to take possession of it, to acquire the weapon, and it's an application for every single weapon. It's not a license like you have an FFL as a dealer. Okay, so you're submitting an application, and you have to pay a $200 transfer tax on each application. And once that's approved, you can take possession, and it's registered to you. Or if you use a trust, it's registered to your trust.
So if you have one of those types of weapons, it's a license for each type of weapon. So like
Yeah,
if you have an
it's,
automatic rifle that needs a license, if
it's an
that
approved
has a
transfer. Yeah, you're applying to transfer the weapon from the dealer to you, or from the seller to you, and that application has to be approved. Yeah.
okay. So on the transfer.
Hmm.
So when did these gun trusts? When were they invented, or when did they become a thing? So you said about 15 years ago is when you got into it. Is that
Yeah, I
kind of
started doing them about 15 years ago, but I think they really started to, find their foothold in the earlier that decade. The first decade of the century here.
so early 2000s? You're
Yeah,
saying?
they started to take off in popularity, and I think in large part to an attorney in Florida named David Goldman, who really seemed to popularize these. But the NFA, as it's written, it defines a person that can purchase these weapons to include a trust. Okay. And the benefit of applying as a trust instead of as an individual is that the way that the law is written, the NFA, National Firearms Act, is written, it says any unapproved transfer of these weapons is a felony. And then the statute defines transfer to include the act of loaning the weapon to any other person. Okay. But loan itself is not defined by the statute. But the dictionary says a loan is simply the grant of permission to use something. So if that's what loan means, you probably shouldn't even be letting anyone else shoot these weapons, even if they're in your presence, right? Now, ATF has never enforced it that strictly, but just last year they updated their FAQs page to include a question that said, if I'm at the range, can I let my buddy shoot my NFA weapons with me while he's with me? And the answer they posted said was no, you can't. Only those persons that were listed as a responsible person on your application that underwent a background check can possess and use those weapons. So the answer that they gave wasn't really responsive to the question, because the question didn't seem to imply that there a trust or other entity was involved, and you only have responsible persons involved in the application process when you apply as an entity, like a trust or LLC or corporation. Okay, but it gives us some insight that even though no one's been prosecuted along these lines, they're thinking it, that you can't let anybody else use these weapons. Okay, even if you're like shooting with your kids, or your best group of friends or something. But
so does a properly drafted gun trust, can it solve that problem then?
Right. Yeah.
So would you put your buddies in there with it too then, or your friends that you shoot with?
Yeah. You apply as a trust, and then as the grantor of that trust, you can make others beneficiaries of that trust, or a trustee of that trust. As a beneficiary, of a trust, you have a legal right to the use and enjoyment of trust assets, right? So there's an argument there that's extended that their use of these weapons in your presence isn't a transfer, because there's a legal right extended to them through the trust. So that there's hopefully at least a defense to prosecution if that scenario ever arose. But the biggest benefit is that if I want my son to be able to take a suppressor and go and use it outside my presence, I can make him a trustee. And then he can have legal possession outside my presence, which I absolutely can't do if they're registered in my name.
Can he, does he have to be a trustee, or can he be a beneficiary and do that?
As a trustee, trustees have that power of possession of trust assets. So by signing him up as a trustee, which we, provide just some really simple forms you fill out, I've added that person as a co-trustee or special trustee. We have two different approaches. They can possess those NFA weapons, and they can be used outside my presence.
Yeah. So one of the problems that I understand that these gun trusts solves is if, let's say husband has guns, has the licenses, passes away, and wife, if she's not licensed, it could be illegal for her to own those. Is that true, or is that kind of an issue?
Not exactly. They can be transferred. The regulations actually that were adopted back in 2016, part of those regulations were to codify what had been their general practice about how they can be transferred after the owner's death. And the personal representative of the estate, it has under those regulations, can legally possess them during the reasonable term of probate. Okay. And make the transfer applications to transfer them to heirs of the estate. And that is a tax-free transfer, incidentally, because it's involuntary, but the application has to be submitted and approved before that heir can take possession. Okay. So there's not really a fear that they'll be lost because the wife isn't licensed. They are properly transferred. And if she's the personal representative, she can be in legal possession while she's making those transfer applications, or if they're being transferred to the kids or whatever. But we have seen cases where the ATF has required a probate occur to make that transfer happen. So again, by using the trust, we avoid that probate issue too. That's another potential benefit.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. So if everything avoids probate and a trust, the ATF still likes to see a probate. They like to see a personal representative appointed.
Yeah, sometimes they've gone through without the appointment of the personal representative, but we've seen cases where they've required the appointment. So, it's kind of a hit and miss thing as to when they will or when they won't, but they have. That is a potential issue. And you can also set the trust up to be a dynasty trust too. Utah has a 1,000-year rule against perpetuity.
That's twice as long as Arizona. We're only 500-year wait and see.
Yeah. Nevada's is 365 years, right? Problems
are great grandkids may have to.
Yeah, so
look
you
at.
can keep the weapons registered to that trust for the benefit of all of your descendants to share and use too.
Yeah. So lots of places for gun trust out there.
Mhm.
So I was talking to a client the other day. He said he got his just done at a gun shop. So
Yeah.
is that I know it's just kind of like trust and estate planning. There was a message board, some attorney message boards, and it said, what would you say to to the planner that doesn't do trust all the time, that just kind of dabbles with it. And my answer was, I would say thank you for all the money I've made fixing your mistakes. It's bad for the public, but just because you have a form, estate planning is one of these areas. It seems like people, just because they have a form, they're like, oh, I can do that. And it
Mhm.
sounds like gun trusts are kind of same thing. People have a template.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between getting your gun trust? And then are there different levels to it? Like you said, you can do a dynasty trust with it. So that sounds like a higher level.
Yeah, we do offer three different levels, but there's a really good illustration of why the gun store template might not be a good idea. I had the opportunity to tour the ATF's facility, the NFA branch facility back in Martinsburg, West Virginia, 4 or 5 years ago, and sit down and meet with the NFA branch general counsel Bill Ryan and the chief examiner at the time and such, and they relayed a story about how they had seen hundreds and hundreds of the same exact trust, where somebody was passing around a template and everybody was using it over and over again, but because they don't know who what remainder beneficiaries are of the trust, this trust that they're passing around and using, sharing and using, just changing the grantor and the initial trustee, left all of the weapons of all of these hundreds and hundreds of trusts to one woman in Kansas. They were totally unaware that they were leaving their weapons to some strange
Oops.
woman that they didn't know of. Okay?
Wow, just because it was in there somewhere, no one looked at that provision.
Yeah, didn't know to look at that provision, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. That's the problem with saving money on planning is you don't know what you don't know, and you think you're great. You got this trust, you saved a few bucks, did it on your own, got a template.
Yeah,
Um,
and you left your weapons collection to some stranger you've never met before.
wow. So yeah, and then what other problems do people run into with gun trust? So I guess just getting a template, not being aware of what's actually in there, and who's. I guess the question is, anyone really helping you do it, right? Gun
That's a big issue.
trust.
That's a big issue. We routinely end up helping clients in dealing with their gun store that they're trying to buy something from because they're having some sort of an issue. And when you do an online template for $99 or something, you don't have that service. But we routinely are assisting clients with these types of issues. We've had a case where a gun store messed up applications and actually put the client's brother's trust in his application, and we had to help him get this resolved. You don't have that backup support type of support, or hey, I'm trying to figure out, remember what I'm supposed to be doing. We beg and plead with clients, hey, just ask. Shoot me a message on Facebook, and I'm happy to answer to make sure you understand what you're doing and
Yeah,
keep you out of trouble.
and these guns aren't cheap, right?
Oh no, yeah, some of them. If you're into the machine guns, you can be really spending a lot of money because there's a limited supply of those and increasing demand. And so, if you want to buy an M16 or MP5, you could easily spend $30,000-$40,000.
Wow. So, well, thank you. That's very helpful. So, I guess so. To clarify, can you help people in any state do a gun trust? Do they have to be in Utah?
Not necessarily. Under Utah law, I certainly can't advise a client, who's in Arizona as to Arizona law, but I can advise them as to the NFA law.
Right. This is all federal, right? With all these gun trusts.
But as to Arizona's weapons law, I can't advise them to that because I'm not licensed there. But I can set up the Utah trust, and it's effective for someone wherever they might be, because we don't require that there's a fiduciary located in the state of Utah. and it can be administered properly anywhere and work just right, just fine.
Yeah. So just like getting your estate planning done, I would recommend, you've seen someone qualified. If you have any guns in your estate plan, specifically any of these NFA licenses, it makes sense to see someone that can help you, wrap those into your estate plan. That's cool to hear you can do it in a Dynasty trust. So just kind of quickly, the way I describe Dynasty trust, I'm a big fan of them. Right now the estate tax, the true estate tax doesn't affect that many people, with the exemption at, $12 million times 2 for a married couple. Right now they can pass, almost 25 million, but there's still a Dynasty trust. What it does is it allows the beneficiary to have their inheritance separate from them. It's kind of how I view it. So that way they get to control it. They get to do whatever they want with it. But if there's any type of liability created, they don't own it. So they get the control without the ownership.
Yeah, that can be really important for the monetary or property and such that they might be receiving. In the gun trust scenario, we're just typically setting that up to be a common trust for all of the grantor's descendants so that they can, the NFA weapons stay registered to that trust. There is no transfer after they die. And the successor trustees can name their successors, who can appoint co-trustees and special trustees, so the family can continue to share the use of these weapons without them being transferred out of the trust.
So is that pretty common then? Are families doing that?
Yeah, we're doing quite a bit of that. In fact, in the last couple of years, maybe it's because inflation has come up so much that people go, oh, $1,200, hey, that's no big deal anymore. and are setting up quite a few of these now.
Yeah. Nice. I know I've seen the Dynasty trust with regular assets continued for the third and even the fourth generation, which is pretty cool. You see where someone started at, a grandfather or a great grandfather, and it helps, down the line.
Unfortunately, the gun trusts are pretty formulaic. So, they're not as expensive as we might charge for, some real Dynasty planning where there's significant estate, type of assets, taxable assets involved. But it's really a great idea, a great vehicle for the NFA weapons.
Yeah, I like that idea. Just as without getting too political, maybe harder and harder to have these types of things.
Yeah, that's
so it may be in a few generations. These are the only types of families that have these things. That did the planning and did everything to get it locked up.
Yeah, there is that potential, depending on how future laws might be structured, that if the weapons are registered to that trust, that they may be able to continue to possess those and share the use of them, where you may not be able to acquire them individually anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like the concern I would think of. Once you have those licenses, you're already in. That's a whole different story than if you're trying to apply.
Hopefully, yeah. It depends on how they structure that law, though.
Well, thanks, Jim. Let everyone know how can they find you if they need a gun trust or help amending or updating their gun trust. What's the best way to find you?
Yeah, we have a URL that takes people straight to the gun trust pages of our website. It's utahguntrusts.com. Easy way to find us.
.com. All right, let's see if I can,
post
this comment. I don't know if I know how to. There we go. So utahguntrust.com. You can reach out to Jim Alder if you need help, updating a gun trust, creating a gun trust. Really cool idea that I didn't realize you can have a Dynasty gun trust. So that's pretty cool. If you have a collection, if you're building a collection, it's definitely the way to do it. Make sure that your family is able to use it. Make sure there's not any issues after you're gone, and that this collection is lost. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.